Welcome to the Haji Podgy Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Strati. Thank you guys for bearing with me while there was a delay. So sorry. I literally had no voice the day I was supposed to record this episode. As you can tell, I still sound a little raspy. So we'll try and get through this as best I can. It's been a week now, a little over a week since I lost my voice, and it's been slow going getting it back. So thank you guys for being patient. I really, really wanted to do this episode before Christmas, but you can't help being sick sometimes, and I wasn't about to give you a whisper episode. That would make us all feel really uncomfortable. So we're doing it today, keeping the Christmas magic alive a little bit longer. I don't think there's any problem with that. I will obviously probably be taking more sips of water than normal. We'll see how cigarette smoky I get, how 900 number I end up being by the end of this. So we're not going to waste any time here. We are going to be talking about two classic holiday movies. They are Christmas icons, movies I watch every year. My kids know one of these movies particularly well because I do put it on all the time. So they know it quite well. My son knows when to cover his eyes or look away when something's inappropriate. They know what to do because they've seen it so much. We will start with another movie they haven't quite seen. They've seen bits and pieces of it and they know a little bit about it. But that first movie is going to be National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. This movie has been a holiday staple for many families for years. A lot of people watch it because they loved the other National Lampoon Vacation movies. I personally have only seen one of those movies, maybe two, and maybe only once or twice. I really don't remember them very much. I feel like I don't even know if I actually have seen them. I just remember bits and pieces that I've seen on the TV growing up. I have seen Christmas Vacation many, many times, though. I love watching it because I felt like a part of me is Clark. We just want to make Christmas the best for everybody. And sometimes, try as we might, try as hard as we can, it just doesn't happen. It ends up being a complete disaster. So I feel like a lot of us can relate to Clark and his desire to have that old-fashioned family Christmas. And it doesn't always work out that way. But in the end, it doesn't really matter because you're with your family. It's Christmas time. It's the season of giving. And you kind of let all of those expectations and everything go and just live in the moment of Christmas with your family. So I love that part about the end of Christmas Vacation after this complete S show that happened to them and their house. They come together and realize none of that matters. What matters is their family that they love unconditionally, whether they drive them crazy or not. So we're going to start, though, by talking about how this all began. The Christmas Vacation movie was it was written by John Hughes. If you remember from my Home Alone episode, he was the writer of Home Alone. Many of the Breakfast Club movies that the 80s kids grew up with. He wrote the first 3 Home Alones and the first Vacation movie. He was also credited as a writer on European Vacation, but that was only because he really created the characters in Vacation, and so they gave him credit. But he typically wasn't a fan of sequels. Yes, he did the Home Alone ones. Those seem to flow better. The cast was better. It wasn't as chaotic as dealing with the different things of the Vacation movies. So the only reason why he actually came back to do the Christmas Vacation movie was because he already had a story for it. He said about the other movies, though, was those movies have become a little more than Chevy Chase vehicles at this stage. I didn't even know about Vegas Vacation until I read about it in the trades. Ever since it came out, people have been coming up to me with disappointing looks on their faces asking, "What were you thinking?" He said, "I had nothing to do with it, I swear." So he was really hesitant to do this movie, but he did have a story that he already had written for National Lampoon. That was a magazine it was a humor magazine that ran in America from 1970 to 1998. And it was published, so he published this story, he created this story called Christmas 1959. If you are a fan of Christmas Vacation, you will notice the scene where Clark, when he's stuck up in the attic, he takes a film canister and the label on the film canister actually says Christmas 59. So in honor of the story that John Hughes got the original idea from to do this. So you can actually read it. I will try and link the actual link for that story. I finally finished reading it today. It's a little lengthy for sure. So, but I feel like if you want to kind of understand where the Christmas Vacation movie origins began, then read this story. There's definitely some different things. I'm glad he made those changes that he did going from that story to this. If you know about what happened to the cat in Christmas Vacation, it doesn't happen to a cat, it happens to a dog. And it's way worse reading what happens than just seeing the little fluff ball be gone. So I'm very, very thankful that he changed it. No offense to cats. I love cats, but I am very thankful that it was just shown as an outline of what once was, and that was it, not a description of what happened and everything else. There's also some things that are said in that story that you cannot get away with nowadays. There were the way that he talked or he used language about a certain person in it. You can't say today, but it was funny reading it. So if you want to read it, I will try and link it down in the show notes. Let me know if you read it and what you think of it. There are definitely similarities for sure, but some huge differences, and I think those differences end up working out for the better. Going into this movie's budget now, this movie had a huge budget, particularly for a comedy, a $27 million budget to be exact, which was particularly high considering that the film had no special effects, a la Ghostbusters, which was made for $30 million. So Ghostbusters, which had tons of special effects, was made for only $3 million more, which is just crazy. The amount that this budget was for this movie compared to Ghostbusters was right there. But it had no trouble making its budget back. The film's final domestic gross was $71,319,526. Not too shabby for back then. So in 1989, when the movie came out, it was only one of two Christmas movies. The other one was Prancer, which also starred Johnny Galecki, who played Rusty Griswold in Christmas Vacation. So he was in both Christmas movies, the only Christmas movies that came out in 1989. So, and what's funny about Rusty is in the original Vacation, in European Vacation, Rusty is believed to be older than Audrey, the sister. So, but in this one, he's actually younger. And it's funny, if you have watched, I know enough about those movies to know that in each movie, there's always a different set of siblings. There's always different actors playing Audrey and Rusty. I don't know why. Maybe because of the ages they needed to be. It was always funny though when I would see pieces of the movies to see different Audreys, different Rustys, and have it just be like, oh, no big deal. So it was Definitely different for people to see Johnny Galecki, who was clearly shorter, clearly younger than Audrey. It was different for sure, but I think he was perfect for the part. Then we will talk about a couple of the stunts that happened in the movie. So there was the light stunt when Clark staples his sleeve to the roof and almost falls off of the ladder. That was all Chevy Chase doing his own stunts. The dangling and the slipping were entirely real, but Chase was able to pull it off with his signature physical comedian style. Obviously, during more dangerous parts, you have stunt doubles, but he tried to do as much of it as he could himself to make it more authentic. And then when, like I brought up before, when he's stuck in the attic and he's dressed, he looks like a little crystal ball reader. He's got the little hat on. And he's all warmed up with all these different things from the attic. And he's watching those old movies. If you feel like you recognize his house that he grew up in, and you see that in the background when they're running outside to greet the family, if you feel like you recognize that house was actually on Bewitched. And it was, as well as it was also for the new Gidget. It was the house for the new Gidget. Except it wasn't a house at all. It was part of the Warner's back lot. Normally, with John Hughes movies, he liked to film in Chicago. This time, it was filmed at the Warner Brothers studio. So that was another difference with this movie compared to the ones that John Hughes would do. The rest of the Griswold neighborhood is on the studio backlot as well. And if the home of their snooty neighbors, Todd and Margot, look familiar, it's because that's where Danny Glover's character and his family lived in Lethal Weapon. So if you're wondering why that looked similar as well, that was why. Then there was, even though they filmed on the studio lot, they did film the snow scenes in Colorado. Where they got the Christmas tree and where they did the sledding scene. So there was a number of scenes filmed in Breckenridge, Colorado. I got it. Sorry, this voice thing just throws off my groove. So it's not like the Rockies are within driving distance of the Griswold Chicago residence, but that's where Clark and the family go hunting for the perfect Christmas tree. Early in the movie, most of that sequence was shot on location in the greater Breckenridge, Colorado area. Also, the hillside where Clark and the kids go sledding is in that area as well. The movie's director, Jeremiah Chechich, told Rolling Stone in 2014, the cast and crew arrived and there was no snow. No snow. He said we were 10 days away from filming, and they just kept waiting for the snow. There was no snow. They were freaking out. So they tried to set up a convoy of trucks to get there to haul in snow for the first scenes of the movie. Then the snow came. Finally, the real snow came. Thank goodness. There was a lot of logical issues, and just as these trucks were rolling up, it finally started to snow and continued and continued and continued. It snowed something like 10 feet in 3 days. It became near impossible to actually shoot because there was so much snow. So be careful what you wish for, I guess. They were really wanting that snow and they got it, and they almost couldn't work with it because it was so much. Then from what Juliette Lewis, who played Audrey, she remembered they had to take snowcats just to get to their filming location. That's how much snow there was. So like I said, some of the sledding scenes, or all of the sledding scenes were filmed there. Chevy Chase did some parts of that infamous sledding scene in Christmas Vacation. While stunt doubles were used for the high speed and dangerous portions, Chevy Chase was involved in parts of the scene obviously with the close-ups of his face and everything, particularly for the close-up moments where you see him launching off. That's him going down that hill. And the scene's hilarity is amplified by his over-the-top expressions, which he obviously nailed. That's one of the great things about him as an actor is his expressions are just so animated. Kind of like the same with like Jim Carrey. Interestingly, the sledding moment is a fan favorite for its pure absurdity. Only Clark Griswold would turbocharge a sled with non-caloric silicone lubricant and live to tell the tale. For sure. Like, if you don't remember that scene, he has this solution from his work, makes it nice and slick, the metal sled nice and slick, and he gets there and goes whoosh, and just takes off with like flames shooting down behind him. And it is completely absurd, but also hilarious at the same time. You wouldn't expect anything less from Clark Griswold sledding. Then we got to go and talk about, of course, Cousin Eddie. Cousin Eddie, who was played by Randy Quaid. There's no way, if you've seen Christmas Vacation, there's no way you don't remember Cousin Eddie. He's kind of a big part of the movie. So he was actually, his wardrobe and his mannerisms were actually modeled from a guy he knew growing up in Texas. Most notably, his tendency towards tongue clicking. If you watch the movie with the subtitles, you'll see tongue clicking quite a bit. Whenever Cousin Eddie is around, you'll see tongue clicking in the little subtitles, which is pretty funny after reading that about him and then seeing it. I'm like, oh, he does do that quite a bit. But his sweater dickie combo, now if you remember, he was wearing like the cream or white sweater and then the black dickie. So it's like a little turtleneck thingy and it goes down here, but you could see the black through the white. That was an idea that actually came from Quaid's wife. And it turned into being like this one of the most recognizable and intentionally ridiculous outfits that you can actually go to websites and buy. If you want that look, you can buy the dickie, and you can probably actually buy the sweater. So you can actually buy the sweaters, moose mugs, and punch bowls. So the moose mugs, if you remember, when Eddie and Clark are drinking the eggnog, they're using Wally World mugs. So that's what those are. They aren't reindeer, they're Wally World mugs. And I remember it was like 3 years ago or something at Target. They had like a pack of 6 or something for like $15 at Target. And I was like, oh, I want to get those so badly. But they got like moose antlers sticking out. So I was thinking to myself, I already have like 1,000 mugs. My husband will kill me if I get these. But they're only $15 for the amount that they were. Didn't get them. Kicking myself still because now they're way more expensive. So I was like, God dang it. Trust your gut, people. But back to, you can buy your own dickie. You can buy the moose mugs if you want to, or the punch bowl on websites. Just, Google it. But he had some classic lines. And it was just, again, he is one of those characters that is extremely memorable. And one of his lines that obviously most people remember the most is, sorry, there will be swear words in this episode. Only when I am quoting things will I be saying these swear words, because saying the makeup words for them just don't get it across quite as well. So I can't say the pooper's full. It just doesn't have the same effect as the shitter's full. That was one of his classic lines. Everybody likes to say that. It's hilarious. It's completely Cousin Eddie. So that's one of his classic lines. Then, of course, at the Christmas table, when Clark's talking about seeing Santa, that he's being tracked, then Eddie goes, "You serious, Clark?" That's another line that people like to say. I actually got a shirt from my sister-in-law that says that with the little hat that Eddie likes to wear. So he was a classic character. Everybody remembered. Another character you cannot forget is Aunt Bethany. So Christmas Vacation actually marked the final film of Mae Questel, who played Aunt Bethany. Her career actually began as Betty Boop in 1931. So when you see Betty Boop and you think back, if most of you should know who that is. She was a cartoon character back in the 30s, but most people grew up knowing who she was, and so she was the voice of Betty Boop from 1931 to 1939, becoming the most iconic and famous Betty Boop in history. So when you hear, like I said, when you hear that voice, it's most likely going to be the one who played Aunt Bethany. She also did olive oil from Popeye from 1933 onward. So Popeye was another one I grew up watching when I was younger, with the spinach and everything. Hopefully you guys know who Popeye is. If not, I'll feel it really extra old. But I'm really hoping that you know who Popeye is and Betty Boop. So she was the voice of olive oil and Betty Boop. I didn't realize that until I started doing this research. So I think that is funny to learn. So if you didn't grow up knowing those characters, when you see that movie and you see Aunt Bethany, you probably wouldn't get that she was an actual icon at the time, but she absolutely was. So another one of her, I'll get to some of the funny lines from the movie when I get closer to the end of this movie section, because she has some good lines as well. Always cracks me up. We got an advent calendar for Christmas Vacation this year, and one of the things that was in there was a present with a cat's tail sticking out because she accidentally packed her cat, or she wrapped her cat, and then the Jell-O mold with pieces of cat food in it. We didn't get Cousin Eddie though, which is weird. Like, they had all these other things that were like related to it, but we never got Cousin Eddie. So if the creators of that advent calendar next year, please include Cousin Eddie. That's what we want. So, but it was funny to see this tiny little green Jell-O mold thing from this calendar with little pieces of cat food in it, because that's what she packed as a gift for the family. So, hilarious. Then there was, so if you haven't seen, it was funny, they actually make fun of themselves and having the different Audreys and the different Rusties, and you can Google this commercial or YouTube it. But Chevy Chase, Beverly D'Angelo, who played Ellen, and then Juliette Lewis all reunited in 2012 for an Old Navy commercial. So you see it in it. He goes, "What do you think, Rusty?" And it turns to, it wasn't Johnny Galecki. It was the original Rusty, which was played by Anthony Michael Hall. And then he's like, "Oh, and what do you think, other Rusty? What do you think, other Audrey?" And it was funny because there was two Rusties, two Audreys, and they just kind of made fun of the whole thing. But it was a really funny commercial. I remember seeing it back when it came out. And if you want to watch it, it's on YouTube for Old Navy, just Old Navy Christmas Vacation commercial, and I'm sure it'll pop up. So, and I know that I said in the Home Alone episode, if you remember, that the director of Home Alone chose not to do the Christmas Vacation movie because he couldn't work with Chevy Chase. They just clashed. He didn't think that Chevy was kind to him at all. So I was really surprised to read, because I've heard, you hear things about celebrities. I heard that he was kind of a jerk. Now that he's older, he's changed his ways a bit. But I was surprised to actually read a lot of good things that Johnny Galecki said about him. He said that he became like a comedy tutor on set. Johnny Galecki said, while the script required Rusty to do some heavy comedic lifting, his own sense of timing wasn't on point. And according to him, Chevy would help him out, especially with the timing, and tell him ad-libs to say. So he recalled sometimes during lunch breaks, Chevy he used to bring his co-star to the set of Harlem Nights and Ghostbusters 2. So here Johnny Galecki was at 13 being introduced to Red Fox and Eddie Murphy, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, Richard Pryor, and all these incredible comedic icons of the day. And he didn't know what to do with that, and was still like very touched that Chevy took that time to do that for him. Then there was also one thing that Johnny Galecki made a mistake about. He still regrets it. This kind of hurts my heart a little bit. I was kind of sad to read this. So Rusty and Clark always share like a heartfelt chat they shared it in the previous Vacation movies. Yet in Christmas Vacation, they don't really get that. So there's a dialogue-driven man-to-man scene written by John Hughes that never made it into the final shooting. So on set, Chase wanted to film that scene anyway, but Johnny Galecki felt differently. And so they asked what I thought, and I said, I don't think there's any point. Since they didn't think it was going to make it in the movie, but Chase wanted to film it anyway. Johnny Galecki said no. And he said, I literally talked myself out of what could have been a classic scene with Chevy Chase. Now I realize the error of my ways. I still kick myself in the ass for this every day. Like, I would probably do that too, buddy. I'm not quite sure if he just felt like he wasn't going to be up to snuff to doing that. So he just felt like, let's just not do it. He didn't want to let Chevy Chase down and just kind of just talked himself out of it and made it seem like, oh no, there's no point in doing it. So I would have loved to have seen that scene if they had actually done it. So maybe one day, and Chevy Chase is like 80 now, so I don't know if they'll ever like try and do it. if it's just one of those things that's never gonna be known. So kind of a bummer, but there are plenty of other awesome things about this movie or fun little tidbits about it. Like when Clark completely loses his crap, he does it a few times. But the first time with the whole scene with the lights and they don't work and he just goes crazy. So when he's demolishing Santa's sled after his second failed attempt to get the Christmas lights up and running, old Saint Nick got his revenge. Chase broke his pinky during the assault. So when you see him in the movie, you see him punch that Santa Claus. He broke his pinky doing it. So, but he wanted to keep the scene going, so he just kicked everything instead the rest of the time. So since the cameras were rolling, he couldn't stop without ruining the take, and he had to keep kicking because it hurt so much. So this poor guy, like Santa was like, oh, you're going to hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. And just broke his pinky. So it's funny, I was watching that scene with the kids the other day and saw him just clock Santa and knew, bang, man, he just broke his pinky. So it was obviously sad that he got hurt, but funny at the same time knowing that Santa ultimately got his revenge on Clark. Then what I thought was hilarious and insane was the classic Clark's meltdown. When everything has just gone to hell in a handbasket, he gets that bonus that ends up being the Jelly of the Month Club and not the money for the pool. And he just goes totally crazy. So his legendary tirade where he says, hallelujah, hallelujah, holy shit, where's the Tylenol, was done in a single uninterrupted take. If you realize, like if you watch that movie and know how long that tirade is and all of the different things he says, that is crazy. The rest of the cast was in awe of his ability to nail such a long and chaotic monologue. And as Beverly D'Angelo explained, they helped him as best as they could. She said, this particular scene was blocked in a way that would allow each of us to have around our necks a piece of rope that was attached to a big cue card. So they had cue cards. That's why you only see one shot of the family all together as he's just losing his mind. But the rest of the time, he's just going off and you just see their backs. It's because they were holding cue cards. And the rant was divided into sections so he could go all the way through from the beginning to end without a chance of forgetting his lines. So if you watch it, you can see him go from one character to another as he's going on in his speech because they've got the lines there. Never would have guessed that. Still crazy impressive that he was able to be in such character, completely lose his marbles as Clark, say all of these lines, whether you're reading them from cue cards or not. Like, you still have to know which ones, where you're going, and make it look like you're not reading them, still have them partially and mostly memorized, and do that in one take. Like, that is absolutely incredible. So impressive. So that was, when I read that, I was really surprised that that was the case, because I would have thought that that would have taken forever to get. Then there's the, like I just mentioned, the advent calendar. The advent calendar that they show in the movie, they actually added during the post-production to enhance the holiday atmosphere, which is, I loved that calendar and loved seeing those dates when I was little. But being a grown-up, when you see the dates and the doors being open and you realize that their family was there from like the 18th of December, that is a long time to be stuck with those kind of in-laws. Luckily, I've got great in-laws, so it wouldn't be terrible for us. But the 18th until like the 26th or whatever, that's a good amount of time to be stuck with those lovely people. So when I grew up and I actually paid attention to the dates, I was shocked. Oh man, that is a lot of time. So it always cracks me up though when you hear the bell ring and it's the doorbell and it goes ding dong, ding dong, and it gets more ominous as it goes because everybody in the house is realizing, oh man, the grandparents are here. So it's just, that scene always cracks me up because you feel the absolute dread that they have knowing what's to come with these grandparents and the chaos that's about to ensue. So that is another funny part that I enjoy as well. It's something my mom and I would always crack up about because we understood it. So it's just one of those funny things that always makes me smile when I see it. Speaking of chaos though, another funny thing that I found out, my kids weren't too thrilled about this. They were sad. My son mostly because he's more sensitive about it. But the squirrels, if you remember the scene where Clark cuts down a tree in his yard, brings it inside, and then the squirrel comes out and that whole crazy scene happens. The squirrels were a problem. And so the infamous squirrel scene almost didn't happen. The trained squirrel they were supposed to use died the day of filming. The trainer said, well, squirrels don't live that long. I think he just died of old age. And they think that he died of natural causes. So production scrambled to use an untrained replacement. This isn't like a dog where they can kind of understand, and they're like, it's kind of in their DNA to understand certain things. It's a squirrel, man. It is a squirrel. A squirrel. So it made the scene even more chaotic, which is why, like, you can see that they sometimes had to use a stuffed squirrel because they couldn't exactly train the wild squirrel to do what they wanted. So, but when you see the chaos that is happening, a lot of that is real because the squirrel was a wild freaking squirrel. They just searched for one and found it, like, look, it's the same. So that was absolutely completely hilarious to me. That scene in itself is funny and completely absurd. But when you add in the fact that it was actual real true chaos because it was basically a wild squirrel, it makes that scene all the better in my mind. Then there's, of course, the classic scene towards the end where Ellen, Clark's wife, puts her, you see when the cops come in and they all have to freeze. And I always wondered, like, why is her hand on his area? On his crotch area. Sorry. I don't know. I can't think of a better word to use. But she actually improvised that move. So nobody told her to do it. And so during the craziness and the mayhem and they say freeze, Ellen plants her right hand firmly on Clark's crotch and keeps it there. And she said, I did that spur of the moment and told Chevy just to see if anyone on set would notice. But we did a couple takes and no one mentioned it. So no one they weren't surprised. Like, okay, she's got her hand on his crotch. Just a regular day on set. So that was so funny that it was totally, she just decided to do it and let him know, obviously, it's his stuff. And everybody's like, that's cool, man. So just so many funny things to think about when you go back and rewatch it. Then there's Mr. Shirley, who was Clark's boss. He, if you recognize him, he's been in a ton of other movies with Chevy Chase and Bill Murray. And that's because he is actually Bill Murray's brother. Bill Murray from the Ghostbusters, from Caddyshack, same movie as Chevy Chase. They are siblings. He played Bill Murray's dad. He played Scrooge's dad in the Scrooge movie. That wasn't his name wasn't Scrooge in the movie, but he played the dad when he goes back in the past. Then he also is the doctor in the Ghostbusters 2 movie. Then he's in all of these other movies with his brother. So it's always, I always see him and go, it's Bill Murray's brother. But he actually, fun fact for you, Bill Murray has 8 siblings. So his brother is one of 8 other siblings that Bill Murray has, which is crazy. That is a lot of siblings to have. So just a little fun fact for you. If you see him and you think about it and you recognize him, he is Bill Murray's brother in a bunch of movies with Bill Murray and Chevy Chase. Fun little fact there for you. So, and it was Frank. Frank was the name of Bill Murray in Scrooged. That was going to bug me if I didn't pull that out of my head. So, he played Frank's father in Scrooged. So, we are coming to the end of A Christmas Vacation, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. There is still, I want to go over some of the funny stuff that is still left. Many of us like to quote parts of the movie. It's just, I hear it all the time. I see it online. One of my favorite lines that cracks me up is when he's trying to get past the truck that's trying to get past them, and chaos, of course, again ensues, and they get stuck under that big truck with the logs. So, but when he's trying to initially get past it, he says, "Eat my dust. We're gonna burn some rubber." And then he gets it all backwards. So it's supposed to be, he said, "We're gonna burn some dust and eat my rubber." He says it all backwards. So it's so funny because when you get upset and nervous and frazzled, you tend to say things backwards, which is human, and it's funny. He said just the line all backwards to show how he tried to be cool about it, but he was really annoyed and filled with anxiety about these guys coming up on his rear while he's with his family. So then there's the parts of his famous rant. My sister would always, those parts are always quoted with the holy shit, get the Tylenol, where's the Tylenol? That was always quoted by people. My sister, though, she would always quote from the conversation between Aunt Bethany and Uncle Lewis about the funny squeaky sound. She would say, "It's a funny squeaky sound." And then Uncle Lewis says, "You couldn't hear a dump truck driving through a nitroglycerin plant." And it's just, she always says that line. My sister does. Anytime something like that comes up, or we would hear a squeaky sound or anything like that, never fails. My sister would always say that line. So anytime I hear a funny squeaky sound, I always have to say it because it reminds me of the movie and my sister. Then I can't see a newel post on stairs. So if you don't know, the newel post is the little knob that's on the stairs. So Clark's house, their stairs had a wobbly newel post. And when he had lost his marbles for a bit and cut down the tree in their front yard, he still had the chainsaw, and he was walking past the newel post and noticed that it was still wobbly. So we went, fix the newel post. That line cracks me up every time. So anytime I see a newel post, I think of Clark. I just want to get a chainsaw. Just then during that squirrel scene, when everybody is huddled together, scared of this squirrel, and Clark just yells, Russ! And Russ says, I'm right here, Dad. And he's literally standing right in front of him. That will always, as a parent, I've done it, but it also makes me crack up thinking of my mom, because she would always yell for one of us and we could be like right there, but she didn't realize that we were right there. Or better, she would yell my sister's name, but she meant to yell for me. So there was one time where she yelled my sister's name. She's like, Adri! And Adri's literally like laying on the bed with her, and she's like, oh, sorry, Lauren! And would yell for me. And I swear every parent can relate to that. You're either calling your kid by the wrong name or you're calling them to come to you when they're right next to you. It's just, we all have our own chaos, right? Then there's the line, of course, that people, it's so funny. People love to say this one more. I feel like I hear this more often than not. It's the line of, and why is the carpet all wet, Todd? Followed by, I don't know, Margot. And it's those snooty, yuppie neighbors when the ice shoots out of Clark's gutter and then breaks the window and goes into their stereo equipment and the carpet's all wet. That was a classic line that is still said today quite often. People say it all the time. Then it's one of those things, I want to know what you think. Do you think that Todd and Margot are really the bad guys in this whole situation? Or do you think that it's Clark? It's kind of hard to tell, because you know that they've probably already given Clark a hard time at some point, and that's why he's so rude to them. And the way that they act is really snooty and yuppie-ish, so you're like, kind of hard to have too much sympathy for you. But at the same time, some serious crap happens to their poor house and to them, and you do kind of feel bad. But why is the carpet all wet, Sod? That is definitely a line that is said a ton. So let me know if you enjoy watching the Christmas Vacation movie. Let me know what your favorite parts and favorite lines are, if you like to say those lines that I've talked about. Also, let me know what you think about the squirrel situation. I just thought that was absolutely, I thought it was hilarious. So we are going to move on to my favorite movie, my favorite Christmas movie. My favorite movie is Back to the Future, but this is like a close second. And it is I know you guys know what's coming. It is one of the best Christmas movies of all time, Die Hard. We are finally getting into talking about Die Hard. This was the whole reason why I love Christmas Vacation very much, but it does not compare to Die Hard. In my mind, Christmas Vacation is classic. It's iconic. Nobody can say otherwise. Well, you can say otherwise, but you'll be wrong. It is an amazing movie. Die Hard, though, to me, is on another level of greatness. I don't care if you disagree with me or not, because, again, you're wrong. But this movie was actually nominated for 4 Oscars. 4 Oscars. For Best Film Editing, Best Visual Effects, Best Sound Effects Editing, and Best Sound. It came out in 1988. It had a budget of $28 million, so only $1 million more than Christmas Vacation, and it had a ton of special effects. Not quite sure how Christmas Vacation scored that amount of money for their budget, but I mean, good for them. Then at the box office, it made $140.8 million worldwide when it came out in 1988. So obviously there is the debate that whether or not it's a Christmas movie or not. Though Die Hard wasn't initially marketed as a Christmas movie, Its holiday setting has made it a pop culture debate staple. Screenwriter Stephen E. D'Souza confirmed, though, that it is a Christmas movie, citing themes like redemption and family reconciliation. So, take that, all you doubters and naysayers. And it is, in fact, a Christmas movie. So is Die Hard 2. Don't come at me disagreeing. Again, not correct. You are not correct. They are Christmas movies. They both take place at Christmas. You can't say that they're not Christmassy or Christmas movies. Come on now. So, before we get into the meat and potatoes, though, of the movie, we're going to talk about how it even came to be. Again, you don't know these things unless you look them up. You don't suspect or expect these things unless you research them. So I had absolutely no clue that Die Hard is based off of a novel. Would you have guessed that it was based off of a book? I wouldn't have guessed it. So it's based on a book, a 1979 novel called Nothing Lasts Forever by Roderick Thorpe. The book is a sequel to Thorpe's earlier novel, The Detective, that came out in 1966, which was actually made into a movie in 1968, starring Frank Sinatra as the main character, Joe Leland. So I had no idea that it was supposed to be a movie. It didn't actually end up working out. Clint Eastwood was actually supposed to be in Nothing Lasts Forever, and he owned the rights to it for a while until it transferred over to 20th Century Fox. So that's crazy that he actually owned the rights to it for a bit, but then 20th Century Fox ended up taking it over, which worked out really well, I think. So since the role of John McClane was originally offered to, any guesses? Frank Sinatra, who had starred, like I said, in the 1968 movie The Detective, based off of the book. So, and due to contractual obligations, they had to offer the role to Sinatra, since he did play that role to begin with. But he was in his 70s then, and obviously turned down the role. He wasn't even thinking about doing anything like that in his 70s. So because Die Hard was technically a sequel, they had to offer it to him. Since he declined, they wanted to find somebody that can fill that action role. So after he passed on it, the script went through some changes. The lead character was renamed John McClane instead of Joe Leland, and then the story was adjusted to stand on its own, separate from The Detective. That's why most of us had no idea that it was even supposed to be a sequel, that it ever was a book, because for us it was completely separate. And it became more action oriented. I mean, yeah, you have a lot more options. No offense. I mean, some 70-year-olds can keep up with the young kids and stuff. But at the time, Sinatra wasn't thinking about that. So it obviously was okay to make it more action oriented, having another A-list actor that was younger to become John McClane. So they knew that if Die Hard was to be a success, the studio had to find a bona fide action star for the part. So they set off offering it to seemingly a number of never-ending list of A-list celebrities. They did offer it to Clint Eastwood. They also offered the role to Harrison Ford, Robert De Niro, Charles Bronson, Nick Nolte, Mel Gibson, Richard Gere, Don Johnson, Burt Reynolds, and Richard Dean Anderson. Yes, MacGyver. Could you imagine? Just picture Richard Dean Anderson as John McClane, not knowing what the heck to do. Because John McClane had to figure stuff out. I don't know. That would be so strange. So would Clint Eastwood. That would is just mind-blowing. But so all of those gentlemen were offered the role, and they all declined it. None of them accepted the offer. Then other big names like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone were also considered for the role before Bruce Willis. So he wasn't even a thought. Nobody thought about, oh, John McClane equals Bruce Willis, vice versa. Nobody thought that. They wanted these other big, rough and tough guys to play the role. They all said no, thankfully. And even Bruce Willis almost said no. So producers were disappointed that they didn't snag an actor that was more famous. Little did they know how popular Bruce Willis would become after the movie. So he actually was declined it a few times. He had to say no because of his commitments to the show Moonlighting with Sybil Shepherd. He was on, I think you can watch that if you have a Fire Stick. I think if you ask Alexa, it should come up. I remember seeing it and being curious because I saw her and him and wanted to see what it was like. So they start on this show together. So he already was committed to that. Then Sybil Shepherd ended up announcing that she was pregnant, and because of her pregnancy wouldn't work within the show. So the producer gave everyone 11 weeks off, allowing Bruce Willis to say yes. So thanks, Sybil Shepherd, for getting knocked up. So Bruce Willis could be John McClane. So when he signed on to play John McClane, though, in Die Hard, producers were willing to go all out for the actor. So he may have been like 12th on the list, but once they finally got him, they were more than willing to pay for him. And he was hired for a pay of $5 million. His salary was so high, it caused a wave of panic across Hollywood. Multi-million-dollar paychecks were typically reserved for only the biggest names at that point in the business. And even then, the figures only numbered in the 2 or 3 millions. So Willis getting paid $5 million was a big deal. I think he deserved it, though. He worked hard for it, and he suffered a little bit through the movie and came out with some damage. So I think he absolutely earned that $5 million. So now that we have just learned that John McClane could have been played by a number of other big names, there are quite a few other parts of the movie that were originally supposed to be different as well. So John McTiernan, the director of Die Hard, originally passed on directing it, and not only once, but on a few times, everybody was not wanting to do this movie, which, when you think about it, is kind of crazy considering what it is now. So John McTiernan passed on it a few different times. His reason was that the material just seemed too dark and too cynical for him. The original screenplay was a grim terrorist movie. On his second week of working it, he said, guys, there's no part of terrorism that's fun. I mean, think about the world that we, and the things that have happened since 1988. Yeah, we don't really consider anything terrorists do. So he made a really good point. He said that robbers have fun. Let's make this a date movie. And they had the courage to change it. Absolutely good call on his part to change them to thieves instead of terrorists. Yes, they say in the movie that they're terrorists or whatever, or they are led to believe that that's what the bad guys are, but they are in fact exceptional thieves, as Hans would say. So something else that also was changed was how many days it took for the story of Die Hard to unfold. As most of us know, Die Hard, the plot takes place primarily in one location over a span of one day or one evening. So it's a difficult feat for any film to pull off, but Die Hard obviously did it with ease. So couldn't imagine that being like a 2-dayer or a 3-dayer like it originally was. So it could be because John McTiernan was taking lessons from a literary master. As it turned out, McTiernan turned to none other than Shakespeare for advice when making Die Hard. The original script had the had Die Hard unfold over 3 days. I could not even imagine this movie taking place over 3 days. That is just... So again, he made some very good decisions, but he was struck with inspiration by the famous Shakespeare comedy A Midsummer Night's Dream, whose storyline also takes place in one day. He changed Die Hard to fit the play's structure, making the storyline one of the most impressive and entertaining plots in action film history. Bravo. It's these directors and writers listening to their gut and fighting for what they feel is right to make these movies what we now cherish, know, and love is incredible. So good for them for sticking to their guns. Then one of the reasons Die Hard was so revolutionary as an action movie was its decision to have the protagonist, that means like the leading role, I had to Google it honestly, because I've heard that word a million times before, and I like had a feeling I knew what it meant, but I was like, I just need to Google it to make sure. So like the lead character, the good guy, the lead character. So it was a decision to have the protagonist that was just another average Joe. Originally, that was not the case. He, as you can tell, like Bruce Willis seems amazing and does all these awesome things, but really he's just a guy. He's just John McClane. So he's just an average Joe. So in the wake of other action films that had characters like Rambo in First Blood, who had near superhuman abilities, McClane's down-to-earth character was a refreshing change of pace. I mean, we see this guy in the first few minutes kind of fearful. The first thing you see is he's just gripping the handles or the arms of his seat on the plane. Immediately, like, you can tell that he's tense. You can tell that he's a little stressed, a little worried. And can you really picture Sylvester Stallone as Rambo sitting on a plane, gripping the armrest of his seat on an airplane? That would look ridiculous. Or Clint Eastwood, any of those people. Like, could you imagine them being like that? No, but Bruce Willis was able to pull that off, and you relate to him, and that's why we love him so much, because he's just this guy. So he wasn't always written to be as relatable, though. He wasn't written to be as the relatable character he's celebrated for being today. The original draft of Die Hard actually had conceived of McClane as a sharp, hotshot New York cop who always had the answers. McClane definitely did not have all the answers. Like when he's freaking out after Takagi is killed, and he says, this is one of my favorite lines, and it's one of my son's favorite. He doesn't say the swear words, though. But it's, why didn't you stop him, John? Because then you'd be dead too, asshole. So and he's just pacing back and forth, not knowing what the heck to do. And you can relate, because what the heck would you do? Would you know what to do in this situation? Probably not. So, or when he's trying to stop Hans from continuing to attack the SWAT team outside by using the explosive, and he's just thinking, what do I do? What do I do? And he figures it out, and he probably does too much, but he says, screw it, and pushes that chair into the elevator shaft, and then poof. So he definitely was just your regular guy, which made us love him even more. That is thanks to, though, Bruce Willis and John McTiernan deciding to bring the character in a different direction. As McTiernan says on the Die Hard director's commentary track, McClane's wit in the face of danger brought the character to a different level. So even though he didn't know what to do, he knew he wasn't superhuman. He was funny, he had wit, and he was so relatable. And he was funny. I couldn't imagine anybody else being John McClane. So I know all of you have tried to picture Clint Eastwood Arnold, and Harrison Ford as John McClane, which seems so insane. But can you imagine anyone other than Alan Rickman being Hans Gruber? Anybody else? So now you've got all of these. You got Robert De Niro. Could you imagine him as they offered him to be Harry Lime in Home Alone, and then they offered the John McClane part to him. Could you just see him as I just picture his face like, I'm not gonna get killed today. It's just welcome to the party, pal. Give me a cigar. It's just super weird. So, but I could not, when you think about Hans Gruber, everybody just sees Alan Rickman, because that is who he was. He was Hans Gruber. When people think Alan Rickman had a very amazing career, you see him typically first and foremost as Hans Gruber. Initially, though, they offered the role to, some of you probably aren't going to know this name, but you'll know it when I say what role he played. Sam Neill. Sam Neill played Dr. Grant in Jurassic Park. So the nice guy, doctor man, that paleontologist guy from Jurassic Park was, and he had already had, he was obviously in other things before that. That's just what people from my generation are going to know him best from. He was Dr. Grant in Jurassic Park. I have an extremely hard time picturing him as Hans Gruber. That was who they initially wanted. He's a New Zealand actor that was first approached to be the bad guy. He had an extensive on-screen career at this point and was exactly the type of established actor producers wanted for the film. But he passed on the part. Shocking. Everybody's passing on these parts. And filmmakers were forced to think outside the box to cast their movie's villain. Luckily, McTiernan found Rickman performing on the English stage shortly after Neil's refusal. And the rest, as they say, is history. He actually almost didn't take the role. Again, so many people. No. He almost passed on it because he wasn't sure if he wanted an action film to be his big debut film. This is his first role in a film, in a movie. He was a stage actor. So he wasn't sure if the first role he wanted to take was on an action film and as a villain to boot. So, but he changed his mind, thankfully. There is no one I feel that could have played Hans Gruber any better. So even though Alan Rickman did an amazing job as the villain, he didn't like the sounds of guns being shot on set. So he played the villain cool, calm, and collected more than most. For most of that movie, he was pretty steady, pretty calm. But when it came to those guns being shot, whenever blanks were fired during a scene on set, Rickman would flinch from the noise. Even though he tried not to, the stage actor found it impossible to stop having never acted in an action sequence before. Yeah, if you're just on stage and you've never had that before, it's just instinct until you get used to it. So this forced the director to cut around the actor's jumps while editing in post-production. You can actually catch him flinching for a split second during the scene where he fires his gun and kills Takagi for not giving up the vault code. And yes, okay. I went back and I watched that, and you can see him flinch, but it looks just like he blinks. It doesn't look like he's like, mommy. He doesn't look scared or anything. It's literally a half second. Just looks like he blinks. Not a big deal. He still looks really badass for shooting Takagi. There is also kind of a not so fun fact about the whole gun thing on set. Bruce Willis actually suffered from permanent partial hearing loss from shooting a gun too close to his head. He wanted the special effects to be real and everything, And he shot the gun right next to himself and ended up he lost 2/3 of his hearing in his left ear. So safety protocols, I feel like they were a little bit more laxed back then with guns and everything. Like, you should be wearing earplugs and everything like that if you're going to be shooting that stuff, especially if you're in a confined space like he was with that gun. So he definitely, like I said, he earned that $5 million. Thank you very much. Then when you see the Die Hard's Nakatomi Plaza, it is actually Fox Plaza. It is the corporate headquarters of 20th Century Fox, the very studio making the movie. So it proved to be the perfect location for the movie's much needed Nakatomi Plaza. And it was still under construction there, so there wasn't a whole lot they needed to do to the space to make it movie ready. Then the studio actually charged itself rent to use its space. Not sure how that really worked out, but it reminded me when I heard that they had to charge themselves rent. I couldn't help but think of the movie Super Troopers with Farva when he says, "I just lost $1 to myself." And if you haven't seen that movie, you won't really get that, but it made me think of that because they had to pay themselves to rent their own building. Then this blew my mind. The ventilation shaft scene. So it's one of Die Hard's most nerve-wracking sequences when McClane uses the strap of his gun to rappel down the ventilation shaft in order to escape from Gruber's henchmen. The scene is especially tense when the strap slips off. I've seen this movie 100 times and it still makes me like, ooh, because I picture myself like him and what would I do in that situation. So the strap slips off the gun and causes McClane to fall a terrifying distance just as he's about to grab a vent and climb to freedom. Action sequences like this are normally ruined. I try not to take away the movie magic. In this case, though, I don't think it does that. When you learn how things are actually filmed, this scene might be the exception. So the fall scene in the film is actually a genuine on-set mistake. Originally, the stuntman was supposed to grab the first vent. No fall was planned, but he missed the vent and ended up falling a decent height before catching himself. So once it was confirmed that the stuntman was okay, McTiernan knew it had to make the final cut. So that scene where he's jumping and he falls and you go, oh crap, and he catches himself, that is the stuntman literally saving his own life doing that. That was not meant to happen. So, but it is amazing. That adds to the drama of it, the suspense of it, because you're right there with him and trying to catch it with him, and he doesn't. So you're going, oh no, but he finds his way. So that, when you watch that, know that is 100% real and was not supposed to happen. I definitely have a new appreciation for that scene for sure. So then, now finding out that scene was actually a mistake was a surprise. What was also a surprise was that Hans Gruber and his men were speaking fake German. So lots of surprises in this movie when I was doing this research. I was surprised about that whole vent thing, and then was surprised to find out that Gruber and his men were actually not speaking. I mean, you could kind of suspect when you hear some things like Das Glut, like when they're moving stuff around on one of the levels and it's like the rocket launcher and he's like Das Glut. I'm like, what about your butt? Like, what? I don't understand. Why are you yelling your butt? So, I mean, I could kind of tell that it wasn't real, especially since they didn't have, like, in the actual movie, they didn't have subtitles. But growing up, I remember seeing subtitles on the screen when I would watch that with my mom. I remember it. So I was super confused when I watched it growing up that there weren't any, and when I was an adult that there weren't any subtitles. I didn't understand. So ChatGPT helped me figure that one out. But so Alan Rickman, while he had a great German accent, to fool the viewers into forgetting that he is actually British, his henchmen, none of them were German either. So don't go looking to Die Hard for German language lessons. Gruber and his men are actually speaking false German throughout the entire film. The filmmakers mocked up some lines by sprinkling one or two genuine words in so the characters had lines that would sound passably German to American audiences. In fact, in the German version of the film, Gruber and his men aren't even from Germany. They were changed to be generic European terrorists so that Die Hard could save face and not be caught with having fake dialogue. So I couldn't imagine if they actually didn't change any of that. And you're just in Germany watching the original version of Die Hard. And you're like, Das Glut, Das Glut. You're like, what do you mean? So, but chat, like I said, I remember having the subtitles. I remember it. And chat helped me out. It said that, for example, their dialogue was more often Hollywood German than accurate, which caused some amusement and frustration for German-speaking audiences. Like I said, when you hear those words, you're like, what? But they, they're sprinkled in stuff, and I still don't know any German, so it sounds semi-real to me. But the fact that they didn't have subtitles kind of clued me in that they weren't speaking properly. So, but like I said, I remember seeing subtitles when I was a kid. So chat was saying that for TV broadcasts or home releases, it's possible the subtitles were added to make the fake German more coherent or to match what the script intended them to say, even if the spoken words didn't quite align. The subtitles might have given you the impression that the German was legit, when in reality, it was creative at best. So, yeah, they just were speaking jibber jabber, but it sounded serious and it sounded like trouble. But it was just Das Glut, Das Glut. So I'm going to have that stuck in your guys' heads now. Sorry about that. So now back to another change to the original script. The Hans and John's first meeting. Gruber and McClane communicate by radio the majority of the movie, as we know. And audience members can't help but hope that the two will come face to face. At first, it wasn't supposed to happen until the climax confrontation, when Gruber is about to escape and kidnap Smith McClane's wife. But plans changed at the last minute on set. Producers were pushing for an earlier confrontation, and when they heard Rickman put on an American accent, it sparked an idea. McTiernan outlined a new scene where Hans and McClane would run into each other earlier in the film, and Gruber pretends to be a Nakatomi employee, Bill Clay. And you can see that wall, and they have Bruce Willis go to it, and then they go to the name as well. So there was one article that said, like, we don't know how he got the name. It's literally right next to him. Please do your research on this movie. So you can see that the name says Clay.MW, or WM for William. So it says Clay WM on the wall next to Hans. So he saw it at some point and made sure that he's like, oh yeah, Bill Clay. So, I mean, Hans was incredibly smart. If you pay attention to the movie, he definitely liked nice things. He paid attention to history. He read all the time. And his plan was quite good. Just John McClane effed it up for him. So, but this, going back to the scene was shot with no rehearsals, and McTiernan encouraged his actors to play with the dialogue. The creative decision resulted in one of Die Hard's most entertaining scenes. Turns out, though, that McTiernan never really liked Hans's American accent. So, Alan Rickman's accent, he just felt like he could not get it right. He could still hear the British in his accent. I think, you know, you kind of can, but he pulls it off pretty well. Especially when he's playing a German, but he's English, and he's trying to sound American. I think he does a pretty decent job. So, like McClane says, he should be on TV with that accent. Then there's also, we're going into some little things that you can go back and watch and see if you notice. Like Bruce Willis's rubber feet. So Die Hard premiered in 1988 with audiences around the world. I still cringed when they saw John McClane get caught in a shootout without shoes and is forced to work through the broken glass. He later is forced to pick the glass out of his bare feet in the bathroom. It's one of Die Hard's most famous scenes. So right after the scene where he meets Hans, Nat goes to hell in a handbasket, and Hans tells Carl to shoot the glass. He is trying to run across that glass. He's actually wearing rubber sock-like foot props to walk through the glass and make the scene look genuine. The same props were used to protect Willis's feet in action sequences where McClane had to run around for long periods. Then you can actually see them, and I went back. You can see in a shot that was mistakenly left in the film, towards the end of Die Hard, McClane is caught on the roof by the FBI and is thought to be a terrorist. So as he tries to hide, viewers can catch Willis wearing the foot covers. So, like I said, I did go to the scene and you can see them. It's kind of funny, but really, who cares? It's the 80s. Yes, you could see the stunt doubles sometimes. You still can. With some scenes of shows and movies, you can still tell that even with all the technology that we have, that it's somebody else. But I don't think it takes away from the awesomeness of the movie that you could see those rubber feet. I think it's funny. So there's actually something else that John McClane wore that you can actually go see yourself if you're ever interested. And that is John McClane's sweaty tank top. Bruce Willis donated in 2007 donated the blood-soaked tank top he wore in Die Hard to the National Museum of American History at the Smithsonian. My voice is going, guys. My voice is going. It is, and it's so funny to see, and it's honestly a little bit painful every time to watch the transformation of that poor tank top going from pristine white, no holes or anything, just to brown, then darker brown, then brown and red, and then all beat up. It probably still looked better at the end of the movie, though, than Hans did after his hefty little fall. So, speaking of that fall, his death scene is legendary. For a villain as nefarious as Hans Gruber, Die Hard needed a special type of ending for this antagonist. Figured that means bad guy. So, the director had just the trick planning a dramatic fall for Gruber. Alan Rickman volunteered to do the stunt himself. And it was his last, he decided to do it last. That was his last scene to do. So if something happened, at least they had like I said in the previous podcast, at least they had everything they needed for the movie. So he volunteered to do it himself. And if you've ever been impressed by the accuracy of Rickman's acting during the Hans Gruber death scene, there's a reason for it. So when filming the stunt, McTiernan first told Rickman that he would be dropped onto the mat below at the count of 3. But the director had a secret plan. In order to get the best result possible from his actor, McTiernan dropped Rickman at the count of 2 instead. The surprise Rickman dropped nearly 25 feet for the stunt. The shot used in the film is the first take, and his look of shock is completely genuine. So, yeah, I would be surprised too. If you're saying 3, I'm prepping for 3, and you drop me at 2. and I'm falling 25 feet into this airbag thing. That's just, I would be quite shocked. So there's actually some discrepancy if you decide to do your own separate research about Die Hard Monday. You'll find something that says that he was dropped 40 feet or 70 feet, which is just ridiculous to think that they dropped him 70 feet. But even like 40 feet is quite high. But it was between 20 and 25 feet is what is the distance that he was dropped. No more than 25. It was probably closer to 20, but the best I could get them to pinpoint is it was between 20 to 25. Not 40, not 70. So when I was doing this research and I was looking at different articles and websites and stuff, I was just like, what? So I had to change my answer like 4 times. So that was crazy. When you see his expression, like, oh, he's just literally like, oh shit. He did not expect to be dropped. So I love that is a genuine expression that he has. So then some of the explosion scenes were real. I came upon a podcast that had a stunt coordinator from the film, and he said that they actually used a real rocket launcher to blow up the tank, and they really blew up the second floor. I had a really hard time finding something that said that definitively, like to back up what he said. Not quite sure if that actually happened or not, but he said they used a real rocket launcher and they blew up the second floor. Whether or not that actually happened, I'm not sure. Then there was a confirmed real explosion, though, in the famous scene where McClane jumps off the exploding roof of the Nakatomi Plaza. It involved real explosives. The stunt was so dangerous that Bruce Willis's stunt double only had one chance to pull it off. Glad he did. Then I read multiple articles about what it took to do some of those explosion scenes. There were quite a few explosions, if you remember. And I don't want to, again, like I said, I don't want to take away from any of the movie magic. So I'm not going to go into all those details. Plus they're really I was reading dimensions and weights of different, it was a lot, and my brain just cannot compute. So that was something that if you want to look that up and really want to know those details about all those explosions and what made those, go for it. No matter how many rubber feet, though, stunt doubles or fake German words were used in this movie, it's still completely iconic and one of my favorite movies of all time. So with that being said, we're going to talk about some of my favorite scenes and lines. Sorry, again, there will be some swear words. I can't just substitute the F word with words like fluff. I can't do it. I'm sorry. Sorry, Pappy. So one of my favorite scenes is when Holly locks eyes with Hans after they're taking Takagi away, and he immediately looks intimidated by her. And I just think, yeah, be intimidated by her. You should be. So it just immediately just sends chills down my spine that this woman is surrounded by all these terrorists at the time. That's what they thought. Shooting away. And she's like, she knows that he's in charge. And she just locks eyes with him and goes, basically, I'm not scared of you. So, I mean, bro. Then, no matter how many times I have watched this movie, I will always tell Takagi to give up the code. I will always hope that he just changes his mind one day. That somehow, some way, this movie I've seen 100 times will suddenly be different. And he will say, okay, you can have the code. And they're like, cool, man. You can go sit back down with all of your employees and go see your 5 kids at the end of all this. But it never happens. And that makes me sad. So, still though, maybe one day Takagi will give them the code. Then, of course, one of the classic lines is when McClane is talking to this dispatcher and he's up on the roof on the radio. and she's giving him crap for calling, like, this is for emergency calls only. And he said, no fucking shit, lady. Do I sound like I'm ordering a pizza? It's just like, wouldn't that be all of us? Like, why do you think I'm calling? I'm not calling to dick around. Like, I'm calling because I'm in trouble. Hello. Then, of course, when he says in the vent, come out to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs. That is such a good line that I asked my sister-in-law to get me this sweatshirt that says the line. If you are watching this, if you're not watching and just listening, I'm holding up my sweatshirt that has John McClane on it, and it says, come out to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs. That is one of my new favorite sweatshirts. So thank you, my sweet sister-in-law, for getting that for me. That is one of those lines that everybody also says. Then, welcome to the party, pal, when he's shooting up poor Al's car as he's trying to get his attention. Then one of my favorite scenes, and it is just a split second, but it cracks up my family up every time we watch it. We always have to make sure that we all see it. And that's when, so the body of that guy lands on Al's car, and he is backing up and trying to get away from the gunfire from John. And the body hits this fence, and you just see this body go boing, and just like hits the fence, completely stops while Al's still going. So that always cracks me up, because if you're not paying attention and if you look away for a second, you never see it. But if you're actually watching the movie and you pay attention, it is one of the funniest scenes, because you're just like, what the heck? You just see this body hitting this fence and going flying. So I love that scene. Then, of course, one of my ultimate favorite scenes is when John goes off on Dwayne Robinson, the deputy chief of police or whoever, when he goes off on him because for calling McClane an asshole, and he says, I'm not the one who just got butt effed. I'll say that, butt effed on national TV, Dwayne. And just the way he says Dwayne, and Argyle, his limo driver's reaction because he's listening on the radio, and how he just laughs hysterically, is one of those lines you just can't forget, because you're just like, John's out there, he's in there all alone, and this guy's giving him such a hard time when he's trying to save everybody's life, and he's just not appreciating John's hard work or his sacrifice. So I love that he just gets absolutely roasted. Then any scene with Reginald Val Johnson, who plays Al Powell, is good. I think that he is so perfect for that role and plays it so well. Any scene that he's in is great, especially when he's just staring at Dwayne and asks him if he wants a breath mint for when the FBI comes. It's just, I just love how casual he is about it, and he doesn't care that this guy's technically his authority, like, is technically above him. He doesn't care. He doesn't respect this guy, and this guy, as far as he's concerned, doesn't deserve his respect, so he's not going to treat him like he deserves it. Then there's my son's favorite line that he will say over and over again when the SWAT team is being attacked, and the guy that is doing all the codes and everything says, "Oh my God, and the quarterback is toast." That line is one that my son always loves to repeat when it comes on. I repeat it too, because it's a classic line. So, "Oh my God, and the quarterback is toast" is one of those lines that I hope you enjoy as well. Then what cracks me up is, I'm trying to wrap this up as fast as I can. I know this episode is longer. Give me a break. It is Christmas Vacation and Die Hard. 2 amazing movies. You got to give it its time. Stick with me. I know I'm stumbling with my words. trying not to die because of this cough and my throat. I'm going down quickly. So, but these movies deserve their time. The one scene that always cracks me up will be the scene at the end of the movie when John McClane is walking out with Holly and he's limping, he's battered, he's bruised, he's broken, he's shot, he's all these things. And Al is just standing there sideways watching him limp towards him. It doesn't really make any effort to go towards him at all because it's like symbolism, you know, like everybody else is moving around and he needs to know that Al is waiting for him and that's who he is, his partner throughout this whole thing. So I get why he's standing still like that, but it is still funny that he's just standing there as John's dragging his half dead body to Al to finally meet in person. That just always makes me chuckle when I see that. So we are going to, I can't talk about this movie. Again, I'm so sorry for if my husband isn't able to edit out the coughing. I'm so sorry. I'm trying my best. It hurts so bad right now. So I haven't talked this much in over a week and a half. So anyway, we can't end talking about this movie without talking about the number one classic line of this film. You have to know what I'm talking about. It is one of the most iconic lines ever. Again, swear word incoming, but it's yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. That, or as Hans says it, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. That's how I say it around the house. I don't just like go shouting it most days, but that's how I say it. I say it Hans's way. But Bruce Willis, this fact was crazy to me. Bruce Willis actually ad-libbed that line. He made it up on the spot. So he revealed that the phrase was a joking ad-lib meant to fool with everybody. I was just trying to crack the crew up, he said. I never thought it was going to be allowed to stay in the film. The most iconic line from that movie. He just went, I'm going to try and make them laugh. Yippee-ki-yay. And then just said the line. And now he said it in all of the movies. So it's just, he didn't even try. And it just became this classic line. Absolutely. I was stunned when I read that. Stunned. So who knew that that line would become, he had no idea that that line would become one of the most memorable lines in action film history. So it will always blow my mind. So like I said before, Die Hard is my emotional support movie. I'd have it on the TV as background noise all the time if my family would let me, but they won't. I have to watch it on my phone and kind of at a lower volume. But even still, they've seen or heard it so many times that they know when they hear a certain sound what I'm watching. But they understand that it's my emotional support movie, and I love it so much. Then I also will put it on Die Hard 2. That is another one of those movies that I like to put on as background noise when I need some movie hugs. So there were a ton of things we discovered about both Christmas Vacation and Die Hard. I hope you learned and enjoyed learning about them. Again, so sorry about me being sick. Really did not plan that. Still didn't realize how sick I was until I am recording this podcast. So that's a fun little realization. So, but thank you if you've made it this far. I truly appreciate you listening to all of these fun little facts about these two movies. They are just iconic. I love them. My family loves them. Millions and millions of people love watching these every year for good reason. So again, I thank you for dealing with me and my voice. and all those things, we are going to wrap it up with the like we've done the last 3 episodes of the Christmas special episodes. We're going to wrap this final one up with talking about Christmas traditions and movie recommendations. So I had a couple of friends say that every year each family member picks out a new ornament to hang on the tree, or another friend said they watch Die Hard and they find a real tree and bake cookies for Santa. Then my mother-in-law, Mima, said traditions that she loves is decorating the tree on Sunday after Thanksgiving. Then they used to decorate cookies on Christmas Eve when the kids were little, so when my husband and his sisters were little. Then they always watch the Santa Claus every Christmas Eve, whether or not the kids are there. So normally my sister-in-law stays the night. Then they like to drink eggnog and watch, I think they watched Home Alone and the Santa Claus this year. Then, sorry, there are like sirens and all sorts of stuff going on outside. This is going downhill, people. And then there's traditions for us. We always try to watch Elf on Christmas Eve. We didn't really get to do that this year. It ended up being kind of part on Christmas Eve, then part yesterday, which was the day after Christmas. Or the 2 days? Yeah, day after. Then I always watch Christmas Vacation on Christmas Eve and Scrooged, no matter what. Plus, on Christmas Eve, I always make New York style pizza in honor of my mom. I make that on Christmas Eve as dinner for typically our family and our friend's family. So there's 8 of us that enjoy my homemade pizza. So then we're going to go to traditions from around the world. Here is a delightful tradition that's thought to have started in Germany, but the actual origin is pretty much a mystery. Despite that, everyone will relish in this activity. It consists of somebody hiding a pickle ornament deep within the tree branches, and the person who discovers the pickle sometime during the Christmas season will receive a bonus gift or lots of good fortune for the upcoming year. So maybe that is a tradition that we should start here in my family, because my kids would have a blast trying to do that. Then fruitcake. The frequently gifted cake that's filled with dried fruit and nuts is eaten, I don't know how many people actually eat it, but is eaten throughout the world during Christmas time, is actually not, it started in Egypt and was not an actual Christmas tradition. While the Egyptians may not have celebrated Christmas, the food got its start amid the pyramids and was even dropped into tombs, since it was seen as a must-have food in the afterlife. Like, could you imagine, like, you're just chilling in your sarcophagus, you've just had your brains pulled out through your nose, you're trying to enjoy the afterlife, and then you hear, thunk! Here's your fruitcake! You're just like, I don't want this pound of, this brick of food, thanks. Let me just take my gold and my cat and live my life in the afterlife. That's just what as soon as I read that, I'm sorry, that's just what I pictured. Just sarcophagus, thunk, like the fruitcake hitting it, going, ugh. Anyway, that's just how my brain traveled to that when I heard that it was Egypt, and that's where that started. Then we're going to do one more since it's our last week. In Poland on Christmas Eve, you may feel your tummy rumbling until your family receives a sign from the heavens that it's time to eat. Literally. Polish families don't start eating dinner until someone spots the very first star shining in the sky. And we would have a house full of hangry Stratis if we followed that tradition. That is not something that this family that's not a tradition we'll plan on doing. So we are, as following what we've been doing the last few episodes, I'm going to talk about movie recommendations, then we will wrap it up, and I will go crawl into bed and slowly die. So, man, I thought I was doing okay. I thought I really was. And then this whole hour and a half plus of talking just, So anyway, I know I've said so 1,000 times. Again, I'm sorry. I'm trying to pick my words differently. So I just replace words with new ones. I replace but and with so and if and then, and just give me a break. It's been a while since I've recorded, and I'm not completely there with all of this. So I still have some movie recommendations for you, though. I actually have one I'm going to recommend you don't watch, and that is The Family Stone. I had a friend that said it was a good movie to watch, and then the next day I happened to see a woman on TikTok talk about it, and so it got me curious. I did not like it. I didn't like it at all. It has some pretty heavy hitters in it. Like Craig T. Nelson is the dad, Diane Keaton is the mom, you've got Sarah Jessica Parker, you have all of these other stars, Rachel McAdams, Luke Wilson, Dylan McDermott or Mulroney, I think that's the Dylan. Anyway, then you've got all these heavy hitters in this movie, so you think that it's going to be this great movie, but it's old. It's an old enough movie now that I'm going to spoil it for you. If you, the mom finds out that this time around, she is actually dying from cancer. That she was already sick once. She already had, like, my mom had breast cancer. She had the mastectomy just like this lady did. But she found out that this time she wasn't going to make it. And then each of the kids finds out during the film that this is going to be her last Christmas. She's coping with it. She's staring out into space. And it's just, then there's this weird sister swap thing with the brothers, like with the sisters that play the girlfriend of one of the brothers. And it's a whole thing of drama and weirdness. And then the mom, you know that the mom's going to die, and you see the pain in her eyes, and you see her looking around knowing like everything she's going to miss. And that's just like stuff with my mom started to happen around Christmas. And so I had bad dreams about it the night I watched it. My husband's like, I didn't think it was that bad. He thankfully hasn't dealt with like loss like I have. So he doesn't quite understand, but it was hard to watch because I felt it. I felt it as a mom, and I felt it as a daughter. So plus the extra drama and the weirdness that was thrown in, I didn't care for it at all. Then it wasn't one of those happy-go-lucky Christmas movies. If you're looking for one of those, stick with Die Hard. Die Hard is more uplifting by like 1,000,000% than this movie. Or Christmas Vacation, Santa Claus, any of those are the top notch. This one, if you haven't seen it, you're not missing anything, and I would highly recommend just avoiding it. That's my opinion due to my feelings and my past and everything. 0 out of 10 Laurens in this room recommend. But I do recommend Red One. That is the new one that came out with The Rock and Dwayne Johnson and Chris Evans. It isn't necessarily a kid's movie. There are swear words. There are some scary scenes. My kids are fine with all that stuff, so they watched it. It was actually really good, though. I wasn't sure how it was going to be because I knew that it was different. But I liked how they showed Santa as really strong. I liked how they showed how important Mrs. Claus was and the overall message of the movie. I enjoyed it, and I'll probably watch it again. Then that brings me to my last recommendation, which is The Christmas Chronicles on Netflix. Both the first one and the second one with, oh my God, his name, Kurt Russell. Thank you, brain. Kurt Russell. He plays Santa. I love him as Santa and how he's portrayed differently. Again, just like in Red One, they are portrayed as like stronger, fitter. Not that we don't love the cozier, bigger Santas. We're not showing any hate on this podcast. I'm not showing any hate towards those Santa Clauses. I love them as well. I just like that they changed it up because they were able to do different things being the way that they were. But with the Christmas Chronicles, I love that message. It also is about dealing with loss, but the way that they handle it is a lot different than a movie like The Family Stone. It's not the same. There's more humor in it. The message is stronger and more to the heart than that movie is. So both of them are, both 1 and 2, and they're normally on Netflix because they're Netflix movies, so they're on there all the time. You can watch them anytime. I recommend those movies. They also show how important Mrs. Claus is in number 2 as well, which I appreciate. And then, as always, even though it is after Christmas, let me know if you love any of the movies we talked about today, what your favorite scene was from A Christmas Vacation and Die Hard. Also, if you can relate to any of the traditions that we discussed too, or if you want to still share yours with me, always happy to hear them. DM me, message me, email me. The links will always be in my show notes. Oh, lastly, I just want to thank everyone who has supported me and this podcast this year. I'm truly grateful to you all and pray this podcast will continue to grow and reach many more people this upcoming year. We have a lot of great episodes planned for 2025. I look forward to sharing them with you. I hope you all had a great Christmas and enjoy the rest of your holiday season. And I hope to see you next year if I make it. Thank you for staying the song with me and bearing with me throughout all of this that I'm going through. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I love you guys, and I'll see you next year. Bye, guys.